Welcome back to Irish Illustrated Insider. I'm Tim O'Malley, joined today by Tim Priester for an old school two-man booth. So as such, Tim, I think we'll probably end up talking a lot about the mid-range jump shot, bunting runners over maybe in the third inning, and establishing the fullback dive to throw down the seam to the split-ended flanker. So if you're good for all those, please chime in on whatever's on your mind on Notre Dame football these days.
Yeah, welcome back, everybody. There was a lot going on with Notre Dame basketball advancing to another day of play, whether they deserve to or not. No, I mean, they deserve to beat Pittsburgh, but caught a break there. But look, we're really more tuned into what's going to start happening next week with the start of spring practice. And Tim, you want to talk about some of the I guess topics at the forefront of our mind as we head into this spring drills.
Yeah, I think Tim, you mentioned you're going to be focused on a player for every position coming up in a series for Irish Illustrated. I just had a couple of storylines I want to follow through the spring. I know usually we're trying to see like what players are rising up, who needs to be the next so and so, the next whatever. My first one is who is the next leader for Notre Dame? Because I had a conversation with Pete Sampson and I had kind of gotten this from when I was talking to players down in January at our two major media opportunities before the Georgia game and before the championship game where you could talk to anybody. The leadership void, and I think you write about this most off seasons because it exists every year, but the leadership void this year it's incredible. I mean, they lost five or six of the best leaders of the last 10 years. So if you were to pick 20 leaders of the last 5 or 10 years, they already had five or six candidates from this past crew. I mean, look at Riley Leonard, Xavier Watts, Jack Kaiser, Benjamin Morrison as an injured player sticking around and helping that much is invaluable. I mean, there's no way that wasn't huge for Leonard Moore and Christian Gray that Benjamin Morrison really dedicated himself to doing that. Every player says they're going to do that. Benjamin Morrison actually did that. Guys like Riley Mills as well. So if you're naming a captain, you'd name Steve Angeli. Might be the backup quarterback, or he might be the starting quarterback
Yeah,
somewhere else.
which is why you can't name him
Right,
the
exactly. But I
captain.
mean, is Billy Schrauth ready to be a captain on the
Yeah,
team? Is
I don't know.
the other captain? I guess Pat Coogan would have been a captain. He transferred out. Other guys are just fifth and sixth year guys that left their best talent in the defensive side. Young talent. It's young guys. I mean, Jeremiah Love's the only sure captain, and this is his first leadership role, I think.
And he'll be a junior, and he may not be the only junior captain. I think we talked about this a few years ago before Watts and Kaiser and Cross and Mills, those guys started to emerge. So that's always an issue. And I know, any coach, I looked at that when I was coaching high school baseball. That's important. If you don't have that, there's definitely a void there. So that's something that has to be worked on. I would imagine that by the time we come out of spring drills,
Yeah, yeah,
there'll be a talking point there for our podcast where we say, you know what, who I think is emerging, da da da. Maybe it's Drake Bowen, maybe somebody
right,
like that.
right.
That's somebody has to fill that void at linebacker. Who fills the void along the defensive line? Donovan Heinisch. I'm not sure that he's
It's
a frontline play, right? He's
hard for
not a
Botello because he's injured, but Botello's like, and gosh, you never could have mentioned Botello 2 years ago. It's amazing we're saying this, but it's true.
well,
It's true. He's
yeah,
a candidate
no.
now.
Well, he is, but I don't know that captainship normally naturally fits into his personality.
Right, right.
So, I don't know that you can force fit something like that, but that's something that we'll be talking about as the spring goes on. I'm really interested to see what happens at the safety spot opposite a Don Schuler. Clearly, a Don Schuler. That's now
Yeah.
his position. He takes it over, and maybe Jalen Stroman has that kind of leadership. But the fact of the matter is, he's recovering from an off-season surgery, and so he's not going to be on the field. So who is that guy? Luke Telich is probably the guy that's at the front of the list. But he has his own issues to deal with in terms of winning a starting spot before we can talk about him as a leader. I'm kind of
Yeah, yeah.
blending those two topics together a little bit, but I'm interested to see what happens at the safety position because Watts he wasn't a demonstrative leader by any means, I don't think, but his knowledge of the game and his positioning and his what really became pretty rapid development as a guy learning a position. He moved there, and the next thing you knew, he was He was
Savant
Bronco,
genius.
yeah, he was Bronco Nagurski award winner and should have been a can should have maybe should have won it again. I
Yeah.
don't know this past year. So that's one of the storylines. But Luke Telich, I think Luke, I love, you know, you love the length that Telich brings to the position. That's something that Kyle Hamilton had. Telich probably has even a little bit more, maybe. So you would like him to develop, but he is not an experienced player, and so we'll see how that develops. What positions are you looking at, Tim?
Well, I'm glad you brought up Talich though, because what I like about him, not even though he's inexperienced, is how much field time he's had. Now it's way different at safety, but he really emerged as a special teams leader and big plays in playoff games on special teams. And the one thing people send you into the spring with Luke Talich, he was almost the guy that saved Notre Dame's undefeated season. He forced a fumble on a punt in the fourth quarter against Northern Illinois that was not recovered by Notre Dame. So Luke Talich has been making plays. He just now, of course, has a much harder role, I think, to step in and make plays. You mentioned positions. That's kind of my second spring storyline. There's a glut of young talent. Jeremiah Love is very young, but he has to leave after this. He's going to leave after this year's over. But there's a glut of young talent at running back and linebacker, and I'm interested to see how the very talented, easy starter somewhere else, odd man out, shakes out. And if he's in South Bend, it shows, and this we'll have a question on this later, how much they value just the overall talented players and what they do to keep them. Because, Preston Zinter can start anywhere. Excuse me, not anywhere, for 110 teams in college football and be paid to do so by NIL means. The running back that does not make 3A or 3B could start almost anywhere for Notre Dame. Jabron Payne has been a very good player for Notre Dame, who now lost his position coach and the guy that he followed from Indiana, remember,
Yeah.
to South Bend. There's a glut of talent at those two positions. This is the proverbial good problem to have that usually people just make that saying up. This is actually a good problem to have. You have a lot of good players there. So as long as they stay healthy, someone's the odd man out. You can't play that many. I really want to watch, maybe especially linebacker, to see how it all plays out there, because I really like those five guys. They lost a guy and they brought in Madden Faremos, so they still have five guys that you have to think about.
Yeah, at running, I mean, Jaywan Sider has no idea who Jabron Payne is, other
Right.
than the film that he's obviously looked at. I do want to jump back to safety for a second and not exclude Kennedy Erlacher from being a guy that's in position there to maybe make a mark. Now he does not have anywhere near the length that Luke Telich does, but yeah, it will be interesting to see that at running back and what happens with Kedron Young, because Kedron Young is going to want an opportunity now, and Aeneas Williams is in the mix. And you mentioned linebacker, and there's a whole bunch of good ones,
Yeah.
a whole bunch of good ones there. Man, Framo being here early certainly helps him, and it'll be great to have an opportunity to see him out there with Kingston Viliamuasa and Jaden
Early
Osbury.
too, Tim. Madden Framo early. He's already assimilated because he's been in practices for a
Right,
month.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, he's a big part of this team already, or he's well known among his teammates already on the defensive side of the ball. So, and I also want to I mean, tight end is like we talk about tight end, and it's Notre Dame's tight end U, maybe with a couple of other schools. And but it, especially with Cooper Flanagan being out with the Achilles and James Flanagan not here yet, it's a little skimpy there. I'm really interested to see Ty Washington. I don't care as a receiver. I would like to see what Ty Washington does, the transfer from Arkansas as a blocker at tight end. He's got good size. If you watch film of him at Arkansas, he is an established, proven blocker. But now you're here at Notre Dame, and let's see it on the practice field. So I'm looking forward to seeing him with Eli Raridan. Eli Raridan has to become the alpha at the
Yeah.
position. I'm not sure how that necessarily fits his personality, but he is Kevin Bauman. It would be the oldest there, but Bauman has to, maybe physically he'll be better where there's a greater confidence that he can help, being a year removed from coming off of yet another. How many knee injuries is he?
Yeah,
I mean, knee
he's had a broken
setbacks as he
leg. He's
had.
had two
Yeah,
knee injuries. He's
right,
he's had plenty. Um,
right.
it. I mentioned the void of leadership, or the drain of leadership. Tim Priester has done an annual series on the talent drain. You bumped it up this year, right? To the springtime.
Oh, like every year I come up with like a different way of showing
Yeah.
the opponent. 225 people read it, and then I move on to the next one.
I
But I
Well, I
still
think it's
think it's
interesting. You're three-quarters of the way through, but you covered so far by nature of the schedule, five of the six best opponents
yeah.
probably. So I think it's worth talking about here before we ever lead
Yeah,
into it.
I agree. And I would strongly encourage our readers. I realize that it's not the most scintillating stuff out there, but it just gives you an insight ahead of time as look, I'm gathering this information as we go along, and there's a ton of time involved with it because it's not always spelled out for you and just put there. You kind of have to dig for it. And I guess the two teams that I want to talk about, one of which is USC, which of course is in the news here as they took a Notre Dame legacy away from them with Chad Bowden moving to USC. But USC, man, I would not like to. I would not like to be covering a program where the turnover is so great every year. I mean, the number of transfers out are massive. The number of transfers in is always significant. And I think that's a tough way to win on a consistent basis because you're always trying to reestablish the next team's culture. You're always trying to establish the chemistry of a team. And when you're losing so many guys and bring so many guys in, it's like you start over, whereas Notre Dame is picking up where they left off because they've had so few losses. So,
And Ohio State too. Ohio State too is like Notre Dame.
yeah, no,
I mean,
yeah. And so, USC lost three starting offensive linemen. One of which went to the combine, Monheim, really good player, was recruited by Notre Dame, as JB has mentioned to us before. And look, they've got their video out about their wide receiver university, and they are. There's no doubt. I mean, and funny how each one of the clips has Notre Dame in them, even if,
we have a
uh,
question on that actually later on, so
yeah,
that's good.
I think
Yes.
was it Tyler Horkus said that from Blue and Gold that they lose clips from when the current players weren't even born yet, because Notre Dame has won 6 out of 7. Is that right? Against USC. So
Yeah. Caleb Williams game. Yep.
Caleb Williams game
2002.
being
Yep.
the exception. I put that in Thursday thoughts. I should know that number. But anyway, they have three wide receivers that they lost that caught 189 catches, had 189 passes and 18 touchdowns. They lost Woody Marks, who didn't play against Notre Dame, fortunately, due to injury after early on.
Right.
But they lost Quentin Joyner as well. He transferred out. So, their receivers, Branch, Robinson, and Hudson are gone. They've got good players coming in, but when you have to have so much transition in the chemistry of your team, I don't think that helps. And the other one that, I would mention would be Miami. They've got a bunch of 4 stars that are coming in. They also had 10 guys at the NFL Combine. So there's talent there, but as we know, there's no greater team game on earth than football, and all those components have to work together, and there's never enough practice time for football teams, even with spring football and a full month of preseason.
I think it's interesting that if you look at Ohio State, I mean, Ohio State and Notre Dame went as big game hunting as you can. Ohio State especially, and then Notre Dame, big game hunting in the portal last year to get to the championship game. Ohio State's Quinshon Judkins and Will Howard were the best players in the championship game other than Jeremiah Smith, and they were transfers, and Notre Dame, of course, had Riley Leonard come in. But Penn State was also not that overly, but they have 7, 8 transfers come in to go to the Final Four that year. I think
Mhm.
Texas had a little more. They had a dozen. But yeah, it's a good point. I mean, you can't ignore the portal because then you get Daboed out of the situation. And
Mhm.
and big game hunting is the way to go, guaranteed players. But it is tough if you're a 6 loss team switching out 18 players at 18 in, 20 out. That's probably a tough road to
Yeah,
hoe.
it's like, okay, so Arkansas brought in 22 guys, and they brought in a bunch of good players,
Yeah,
established
yeah.
players.
But
They
Miami
also
does that too.
lost, yeah, and they also lost 27
Yeah.
players. And I realize a lot of those guys are fringe players, but I just think, especially with Notre Dame, and I always say culture, but culture is massive at Notre Dame. And so if Notre Dame has 17 players out and 15 players in, that's gonna impact the culture of the Notre Dame program. So I'm just glad that at least up to this point under Marcus Freeman, he doubled down on high school recruiting, and I think that's the most sound way to do it. Because if you're exchanging dozens of players every year, that's not a good formula for success, especially at Notre Dame.
We're going to wrap up segment one with the end of the Notre Dame men's basketball season. The women's basketball season, of course, will continue, and we'll discuss that next week, Tim, at least the bracket when it comes out on Monday. But Notre Dame's men's season ends kind of predictably. Better team handled them. You made reference to it earlier. Fortunate to win the game against Pittsburgh. I think both teams tried hard enough to deserve to win that game. Neither one played well enough to deserve to win that game. And it ended on one of the worst calls I've ever seen to end a basketball game. Somebody texted me like, I'm glad it's worked out for Notre Dame in this case, but you want to talk about a meaningless worst call you've ever seen? That might have been it because
Well,
it just hurt it just hurt the poor guys at Pitt, really.
first of all, Austin, number 55, if you simply do what you're supposed to do and box out, it doesn't happen.
No, his
But
little reaching hand was
yeah,
was whistled technically for a
but
foul. It's
but he
just
didn't.
it is
And that was the
technically you
same
shouldn't touch him, but
that
it's
was
so
the same
bad.
player that missed a couple slam dunk opportunities earlier in the game
Yeah,
too. So he really cost them the game. But it was a bad call. But I mean, North Carolina's superior in every possible way. And I wrote about it in Thursday Thoughts today. If I'm Marcus Burton, and obviously he came to Notre Dame because the Notre Dame degree was important to him, but he should get the heck out of here. I mean, let's be real. This kid deserves to play in the NCAA tournament. He's not going to play in the NCAA tournament for Notre Dame next year. He could play and start for anybody in the country or virtually anybody in the
yeah.
country.
When I said Preston Zinter could start anywhere, Marcus Burton could actually start anywhere.
He can
I overspoke on that
he
one.
can start anywhere. Somebody on our message board said something about, well, Notre Dame should pay him maximum amount. There are teams that are Final Four candidates that will pay him a maximum
Yeah.
amount too. I believe that he can. And Mark McCormick and I are of the same mindset. I believe that he's capable of competing to play in the NBA. I realize that he's small, but if you watched the last 2 years and don't realize that Marcus Burton can create a shot against anybody of any size, then you're really not paying attention to what's happening on the court. That may not be good enough to stay in the NBA. I get that, but he has a long professional basketball
Yes,
career
professional basketball.
ahead of him, and he needs to play with better players and get better coaching and get stronger and pass the ball better and shoot better. He's got a lot of things to do to improve his game. But the notion that he needs to play with better players and he should go somewhere else and play in the NCAA tournament next year.
The offense is hard to watch. I realized they were lower on options at the end, but it devolved all year, and I think that's my biggest problem going forward. We had a couple of basketball questions. We should have included them because this is the last chance we're going to talk about Notre Dame men's basketball for a while. But what is the next step if Burton is back for Shrewsbury? Because the offense has to change. The offense can't be run the same way it's run now.
What
It's
is
so disjointed.
what is the offense
Yeah,
other
that's
than other than they're I think they've been dribbling less in the last few
last.
games, but
You couldn't have dribbled more than they had the
they
previous six
couldn't have.
games.
Yeah, I don't remember which game it was now, but
Louisville
am I-
was the top tier of the dribbling.
okay, there it was.
Yeah.
Well, you weren't going to beat them anyway, but
Yeah.
and I somebody mentioned I don't we got so many questions going on here, there, and everywhere. About Bray's offense. Bray was it was all about feel and flow and nothing specific. And somebody said that there are too many plays called by Shrewsbury. If that's true, they're not running them.
Yeah.
They
No, it doesn't look
they
it's
aren't. What are they running? It's and really I thought the effort defensively in the last 2 weeks has been really, really good.
that's what you expected as the identity all year though. That's the biggest
Well,
takeaway for me is
I'm going
that
to
went
write
away.
something, Tim. I'm going to write something tomorrow about what Shrewsbury said after the game yesterday about how, I mean, he let them down defensively. Micah
Like,
Shrewsbury let them down defensively this year, and he essentially admitted that. But I thought when they needed to crank it up, they kind of did, but North Carolina was a bridge too far. Let's throw that term back out there
hopefully
again.
for Irish fans, Burton will be back, but you will see roster turnover no matter what at Notre Dame. It always happens when you're good or in this case bad. Looking to upgrade your wardrobe? Founded by Notre Dame alum Go Wang, you've seen ESQ's custom clothing on the player walk and all your favorite players and coaches. With more than a decade of making the best bespoke clothing available, ESQ will help you look and feel your best. From a perfect fitting suit or sport coat, shirt or bomber jacket, or that perfect tuxedo for wedding season, check out esqclothing.com and book an appointment to upgrade your wardrobe today. Mention Irish Illustrated and get 10% off your entire order. That's esqclothing.com. We'll be back with segment two, burning up the boards.
Segment two, burning up the boards. We start with a question from Judge Arthur Vandelay. In a recent recruiting article, Eric Thomas mentioned that several recruits and our high school coaches didn't think the Notre Dame staff made as much of an effort to consistently communicate with recruits as other schools did. What do you make of this?
I was surprised to I know that when Marcus Freeman came in, there was the different situation for Notre Dame, but the number one aspect of recruiting was how much his assistant coaches need to be in constant communication as much as possible with recruits. There was even a joke made when we were talking to one of the first time we ever met Freeman's assistants when they all got together. They're all together in one room in the Chivarelli Lounge. We're all talking to him. It was kind of a fun setup. He kind of bounced around, talked to every coach. The last remaining coach was talking to the media, being very cordial, and Marcus was there. He's like, "Let's go. We got people to call." And I just thought that was kind of like a statement to this is what we're going to be doing now. Tim, do you think it's just part of the turnover at the top of the staff after the run that this would be part of it? I mean, if it was during a time where Notre Dame was making a run and having staff turnover, if that's what you're comparing it to, then it's a little different, I think.
Yeah, I swear to God, I talk about this. I've talked about this for 43 straight years. Um, you have the playoff run, which is unusual. There's no doubt that that inhibited contact during January. I'm not exactly sure um, what time of year this reference was made
Well, I
about.
mean, it inhibits things after signing day in December. Well, there's a dead period, but I mean, December, you're
Yeah,
making a run. There's a lot of the road.
Chad Bowden was being wooed by USC. I don't know how much less he then did for Notre Dame. The reason I say look, every year we talk about fans in particular talk about what a lousy job some assistant coach is doing in recruiting. Every year of the last 43 years that I've been doing this,
Including Al
that is a,
Golden in 2022. He was
right.
pretty good.
That is always a topic of conversation. So is that always reality, or is that just some things haven't turned out well in recruiting within the last week in particular here, and things are going well? But look, if somebody made a comment that there wasn't as much contact, then there wasn't as much contact. So Marcus Freeman is going to have to double down on that and redirect attention back to doing that. I don't know. I don't know what else to say other than the fact that every year I've had to deal with this, there's always an accusation that coaches aren't doing enough. And, Notre Dame just made their first real national title run. Um, I guess you could, well, I still consider going to the playoffs in a 14 playoff a national title run. But, I don't know. I think Marcus Freeman's going to have to go back and get things straightened out again.
This was a memorable run. The other three were not memorable runs as they concluded with their
Well,
splat rather
no,
than.
but still,
Yeah,
when there's
yeah,
four teams left and
right.
you're one of them, that's a national title run, whether
Especially when
you
there's
want to
two
admit
teams
it.
left. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So,
From CMU Pens fans, speaking national title runs, two top coaching lists came out from the Athletic this week. One had Marcus Freeman at number 6 and one at number 10. We should point out that Pete Sampson was not one of those authors. Where do you place him in today's college coaching rankings?
no, Bruce Feldman was the one that had them 6, and Stuart Mandel had them 10. I wrote about this in today's Thursday Thoughts because um, certainly people are objecting to 10, but if you look at Mandel's
Sure.
list, it's based upon their track record as a
Right.
coach. Somebody questioned Kalen DeBoer being ahead, which he was one spot ahead of Freeman in on Feldman's list, but Kalen DeBoer went to a national title game too, and he's
Right.
20, his overall record's like 116 and or 114 and 16. And I mean,
With
he's an
DeBoer,
established.
I think with DeBoer, Tim, people should just realize he is 1 year removed from being 15 spots ahead of Marcus Freeman on these lists. So that's okay if he's one spot ahead of Marcus Freeman. Now,
Right.
somebody else put it on our message board, made a good point. I don't know who I would rather have. He said, "Who would you rather have than Freeman as your coach?" That's not the same as the list. Like Marcus Freeman is the young up and coming coach that everybody is relating to right now. So of course you're going to want to have him over some of the guys in front of him on the list. That is not the question, but you have to give credit to the guys that have won national championships. Um, yeah, and look, Freeman did a better job coaching this year than DeBoer. That's not even close. That's not up for debate. But last spin that back to 2023, right? That's spin that back to 2022
Yeah,
as well.
Kirby Smart's won two national titles. Ryan
Freeman did a
Day's
better job than him
won.
this year, flat
He
out.
did, and he
Yeah.
did. Mandel pointed out that Freeman did outcoach Smart, and we said the exact same thing. Ryan Day won a national title. Dabble Sweeney's won two. Steve Sarkisian has been to the playoffs 2 years in a row, and then DeBoer, and then this is all Brian Kelly's 10. Nobody likes that. There is one. There is one. I mean, I
Ryan Day
don't.
did a pretty good job against Marcus Freeman this year,
Yeah,
so he counts.
I personally don't care one way or another. I don't have anything against Brian Kelly, but Campbell being ahead of Matt Campbell being ahead of Marcus Freeman on Mandel's list again. He has him there because I mean Campbell's a well-established football coach that does more with less than just about
Yeah,
anybody in the country, but I still wouldn't put him ahead of Marcus Freeman.
no, especially not that. I mean, these runs count too. Beating teams like that in the playoff counts. It's a new world. We talked about this like a year ago when will Marcus Freeman have a better career at Notre Dame than Brian Kelly. We talked about how many games he has to win, and then the response was how many big games is he going to win? Well, he's won a lot of big games. Had he didn't win those big games, you'd be still having those conversations. But Brian, he has massive. He's already gone big game hunting, except for one school that he's 0-3 against. Other than that, he has done a great job so far to start his career. Next question, ND Dan 106, who actually had two good submissions, but we have a one submission rule here at Irish Illustrated Insider. In the last couple of pods, the D line and wide receiver position groups have been referenced multiple times as areas that need the most improvement in recruiting compared to other position groups. While we should praise the coaches for developing players, at this point, one could argue that neither of the current position coaches, so he's saying Washington or Brown, have signed and developed a player that has been considered a top 10 player for ND. Now, some qualifications come in here from ND Dan. Bryce Young and Boubacar Traore are on the Al Washington docket. Okay. We cannot eliminate them because you don't like the other people that came in. Those guys are on the Al Washington recruit list and on the development list. Obviously, I don't think anyone's questioning
And
his development.
they are on other than the injury to Traore, they are on the fastest track to
Top
stardom
10.
as you could. Yeah,
They could not be on a faster track to top 10 next year either. So I do want to remove, I think, from that. Of course, right now, he wants to get, Andy Dan says he wants to give some credit to Mike Brown, who hasn't been around long enough, and Greathouse and Faison are trending up.
he is the probably the first person that said that, right? But he's right. Greathouse certainly trended up at the end of the year when it mattered the most, and
He was a
Faison
top
did
10
as
playoff
well.
player. He was a top
Yeah,
five playoff player. Yeah.
yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to add really. Al Washington as a whole has not done a great job recruiting. Has probably got more actual on the field in game production than the star rankings that he's recruited. The wide receiver position, it's a really important spring for Mike Brown because he's got to get Micah Gilbert and Logan Saldate up and running. Cam Williams, I'm not going to blame all on him. The kid's got to be able to adapt and get better, and he hasn't in the short amount of time that he's been there. You look at what Brown brought in recruiting wise. Richardson is transitioning to receiver. Burris, I think, is a great catch, and Bettis is developmental probably at best. So, yeah, the pressure's on those guys. Not every position is going to be elite, no matter how good you are. Even Alabama, even Georgia have positions that aren't elite every year, but we're focusing on Notre Dame, and those guys have to do a better job.
And Tim, I know other defensive line coaches probably could have gotten the best out of some of these guys, but let's think about the development in the last 2 years of Donovan Heinisch, Jordan Botelho, Josh Burnham changing positions during this era too. And I know he was supposed to be good all the time, but Riley Mills in the last 2 years compared to Riley Mills in the previous years
No
isn't
doubt.
even close. And
No
Howard
doubt.
Cross was much better in 23. He was hurt in 24. Howard Cross was a dominant player in 2023. Like, yes, you need more of Young and Traore to go back to the playoffs. You need to recruit more of those guys. But there's just such a dichotomy of the development of Al Washington, and you can't say Young and Traore are trending that way. That's all you are when you're a recruit is trending that way. You can't be doing any better than they
Well,
are as young
and
recruits.
Logan Thomas was injured,
And
and Logan
yes, yeah,
Thomas is trending. I'm going to mention him in a question that we get to here in a little bit, but Logan Thomas is absolutely
yeah,
trending. Maybe not as demonstrably as Traore and
right.
Young did, but he didn't have as many opportunities either. But I know, in talking to Al Washington in New Orleans the week of the Sugar Bowl, he's really, really high on Logan Thomas. I hope he can stay completely healthy through the spring,
Yeah.
gain some experience on the practice field during that time, and then have a great summer. I think that's a guy that has a chance to really rise up this year with those other two guys.
In fairness to frustrated fans listening right now, you absolutely need the next Traore and Young of the defensive tackle realm coming in the next two classes because that is how you beat teams, not with a guy getting much better as he progresses like Donovan Heinisch. You absolutely do need the Young and Traore recruits of the defensive tackle realm.
Question from Statman72. I understand the value the director of analytics can provide during the season, providing coaches with the probabilities associated with the many in-game decisions they must make and updating their probabilities as the season unfolds. However, I am puzzled as to what that person does during the off season. What is there for him to analyze? That's a great question. That's a damn good, great job to have, isn't it?
It is a great job to have, but I think there's a lot. I think a lot of the decisions made in September are analyzed in
Yeah.
May, June, July, and August. But also, I know there's 12 opponents you're looking at, and I'm not sure if you maybe take some time in July to look at who you might be playing in January as well nowadays because the world has changed. I think the director of analytics probably loves his job during the offseason because that's how he became the director of analytics. He is knee deep in opponents and knee deep in what went wrong with probability last year, what went right with it, what to throw out, what not. You can't we've talked about it, you can't just decide what to do here and there, but there's a lot going on in the offseason, I think, because you have to be demonstrative. This is it during the season. There's no
Yeah.
wiggle room.
Yeah, and I think you're looking at tendencies of the opponent. Now, the analytics guy isn't responsible for all of that. Certainly, that's up to the coaching staff, of course. But
Sure.
it's a great question. Not
I
surprised that Statman72 asked it because he asks a lot of great questions.
I bet he gives the coaches what to look for in terms of real. If
Sure.
you're looking at Carson Beck, your opening opponent at quarterback, and you're looking at every pass Carson Beck threw,
Right. He
in
has
which
a tendency
why
to
he's
do.
yeah, why he struggled throwing to the right medium, but why he was awesome deep left. I mean, there's a lot of things in there. The director of analytics can't see the film, but he can see every number involved. So I think probably to answer Statman, a lot of collaboration, right? A lot of
Yeah.
collaboration with the grad assistants and assistant coaches.
Look, you can in every field of study within a football program, everything can be enhanced. And maybe this one isn't quite as obvious as some others, but it's a really good question. I think maybe somebody else has some ideas beyond what we propose there, Tim. But I think, there's a lot for them to do.
Yeah. From Vil Irish, the four highest paid positions in the NFL in order are quarterback, edge, wide receiver, and the interior defensive line. With Mike Martin having an NFL background, do you anticipate additional resources being committed to fix the recent recruiting woes of these positions outside of quarterback, of course?
I don't really know how to answer that, not really knowing Mike Martin. But if the statement that Vil Irish just made is accurate, which it probably is,
Yeah.
then absolutely would be something that Mike Martin would address.
I thought Mike or Martin was asked this by Mike Berardino. Will you value what position do you value coming in? And he said, look, it's subjective to the team. But I think over 20 years, this is what I would value in college. It's different than the previous 20 years for sure, but not the
Yes.
first three. Defensive line has always mattered. Offensive line has always mattered. Quarterback has always mattered more so now than it did 40 years ago because
Yes.
you could hand
Yes.
the ball off.
Yeah.
And in the last 20 years, and I know in the last 10, maybe just say the last 10, I think cornerback is the most important thing to recruit in college football and develop because you can't survive without great corners. If you have average corners and you're playing Chase Claypool and Kevin Austin, who we'd say are like, that's not Jeremiah Smith, right? You're getting torched.
Yeah.
But you're not getting torched by those two if you have Leonard Moore and Benjamin Morrison.
No, I totally agree with you. And then you have to, as was proven this year, you have to have a little bit of depth. You have to have a 3-star freshman that comes off the bench and is like plays like a 5-star.
Yeah,
It's good.
those
It's
guys
good
are
to have that. Yeah, that's helpful when you have
the guy we
that.
hadn't mentioned yet at this point last year.
Oh yeah, Leonard. Yeah, Leonard Moore. Exactly. Like there were no real expectations, on him per se. But yeah, look, I'm very, very interested and fascinated by what Mike Martin can do for Notre
Yeah,
Dame football. Every time, this is like 3 or 4 podcasts in a row, I feel like I'm saying the same thing, but he checks a lot of boxes for Notre Dame, and that NFL background in this particular instance, what is being talked about here by Bill Irish is very, very valuable. So it would be fun to get some one-on-one interviews with Mike Martin and really
I know.
delve into some of this stuff. And I'm not sure how much access we will have to that. The previous general manager was not open to any kind of interview, so we
I could
couldn't
see
get that
Notre Dame not
information.
being too open to it as well. Unless he could talk in hypotheticals. He's not going to, can't talk about recruits by name ever. He would only have to talk about after his first year who he brought in and what he liked in them, maybe. But if you just went in there with no names, I think you could have still a very revealing interview. What are you looking for at defensive line? What are you looking for at
Right.
running back?
Yeah.
And and Tim, I didn't list running back, and I know nobody does anymore. The NFL, the playoffs, the college football Final Four: Katron Allen, Nicholas Singleton, Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson. Jeremiah Love would look pretty nice with those guys. Running back's a pretty important position in college football right now. It's not
They
like
are.
Texas doesn't run hard.
Yeah. They're all important to some degree, right? But
Yeah,
I agree
yeah.
with you. It starts with D line, O line. Maybe you go down the list a little bit to get to wide receiver per se, but
A guy
if you
like
want,
Jeremiah
if you want
Smith's
to,
different than
yeah,
other
if you
guys
want to,
too.
if you
Yeah,
want to take it to the next level,
yeah.
that's inhibited Notre Dame in recent years. There's no doubt. So at the end of the day, they're all important, but you got to win at the point of attack first and foremost. And in today's game, as you said, Tim, because there was a time, and it wasn't, a couple decades ago, where um, nondescript quarterbacks were winning national titles.
At Alabama,
Yeah, right, exactly.
they were.
So
I mean,
so and that's changed. So since that's changed at the quarterback position, it's definitely changed on the back end of that, which would
yeah,
be the cornerback position.
right, right. Next question from Annie Davis, first time caller. Who do you think needs to have the biggest winter? Oh, who needed to have the biggest winter and weight strength gains? For me, it's CJ Carr and Luke Telich.
It's hard for me to, and those are good choices. I
CJ
mean, you
Carr is a
want
great choice.
CJ Carr is an excellent choice, and if Luke Tallis is really going to contend for the starting spot, it's a longer body, so it's a little bit more difficult to fill that body out with the strength that he needs. I don't think you can limit this to two. I think there's a whole bunch of guys. The first one that comes to mind for me, because he's always getting tripped up, is Jordan Faison. He's
I
always
just
getting
thought about saying him as well.
he's
Yeah.
all he's always getting tripped up, so he's got to be able to fight his way through some of those. Logan Thomas would be another one that comes to mind for me because he has a lot of natural pass rush ability. Now, can he take it to the next level with the ability to beat somebody physically? I mean, I'm gonna let you jump in here and then I'll jump back in because I could list 8 guys and I will.
And I have I'm gonna start with this one, but I think Tay Johnson would be one that they love his athleticism, so weight and strength gains and just functional football strength would be huge for Johnson because you got to be able to you got to be a physical guy out there too. You're not always going to be a guy that looks like he could just dunk on a 12.5 foot rim and succeed in football. So I think they love his upside, but he would be one. CJ Carr is a big one. CJ Carr looks a lot bigger than he did last year.
I
Remember when
agree.
we interviewed
Yeah,
CJ Carr
no, I
last
agree. It
spring? You're
was
like,
like, man,
whoa.
yeah, you're right. You're right. You're absolutely right.
I have one who I don't think needs it, but when it happens for him, he's not going down ever, and that's Aeneas Williams because Aeneas Williams will take on anybody for any reason at any time, and most of the time they usually were able to drag him down last year. Now he always would pull the guy for 2 yards, so you end up crediting Aeneas Williams for his grit and toughness. I think once he starts being a college size runner, he's going to be very hard to tackle
Yeah,
as
yeah.
in the flat. And remember, he gets the ball out there a lot in the flat.
No, he does. I got one for you that I know you're going to agree with. Jaden Osbury. He
Oh
was
yeah,
listed at
yeah.
216 going into last year. And yeah, look, the 16 game season, man, that's
He had
a
an
lot
arm
of
injury
guys.
too. Remember, he had that big
Yeah,
apparatus
right.
on. That
A
yeah,
lot of guys handled the 16 games, but not everybody can. And it looked like the last few games he may have been running out of gas a little bit. And he's only listed at 216. So
yeah, yeah.
I mean that's light.
Remember, they had him working at nickel last spring to because they needed help.
I no, yeah, I
Yeah,
realize that. And
they
that
might
may
need
have
to
been
beef him up.
yeah, that may have
Yeah,
inhibited his growth a little bit. But Carson Hobbs,
that was another one I kind of circled as a possibility.
yeah, Bryce Young certainly could, I mean, hell, you can
That's
say
just going to
this.
happen though, Tim.
I know it'll happen naturally. And hell, you could
Yeah,
you could say this about just about anyone. You probably wouldn't say it about like maybe Eli Raridan because he's got
right. Drake,
the perfect
Drake
tight end.
Bowen, I think is the right size.
Yeah,
KVA is
yeah,
the right
yeah.
size. They're
Um, I mean, if he's going to win a starting job, Gerby Lambert probably needs. He's got. It's
got room,
amazing to see him up
got room to
close
put
because
it somewhere. Yeah,
yeah, I mean, he's just yeah, I mean, just strength though. It's not so
yes.
much size, but when you're up close to him, that's a mountain of a man. But is his strength up to where it needs to be a starting tackle for a team that played in the national championship last year?
You know who we didn't mention for a team that played in the national championship last year for the first time in his career? Emil Wagner.
Yeah, well, yeah,
He put it
because he
on.
held up.
I
Yeah,
mean,
and he
he
and
can
he
always
held
add, but
up.
it worked out for him.
I mean, every offensive tackle gets overwhelmed
Yeah,
sometimes, but
but
he rarely did.
yeah,
He kept people at bay. A lot of that is just technique and great balance and good knee bend and
yeah.
all the stuff that you need. But obviously, he was strong enough because he was able to withstand a lot of that, and he'll be that much stronger this time around. Question from G. Did you have anybody else you wanted to mention, Tim?
No, I think I mean, there's guys on the other side of the equation, like, they loved Teddy Rizak on special teams, but quite clearly he needs to add weight, you would think, going into this. And actually, your guy, too, Cole Mullins, I think would probably need to,
Oh,
maybe a reshape or a weight add, maybe a little reshape. He looked like a guy playing football rather than a football player playing football sometimes. He just happened to make plays when we watched him.
yeah, yeah. Well, there's no doubt he needs a whole bunch of weight. Question from G Weave 5. How should Notre Dame respond, if at all, to the USC Twitter post that appears to target Notre Dame?
Now it's hard because I immediately thought of this when I saw the post because I actually thought the Twitter post was hilarious. I mean, it's really funny. They dug up some old highlights of Mike Williams in the era with Carson Palmer's throwing touchdowns, and they had the worst Mike Williams highlight ever. By the way, all the touchdowns that guy caught, and they get the one where he like falls in the end zone against Notre Dame, as opposed to one where he's beasting other people. I would respond as soon as Notre Dame can get a pledge from a top tier defensive back by showing a highlight reel of Xavier Watts in 2023 scoring a touchdown against USC's receivers, Cam Hart in 2023 ripping the ball away from a USC receiver, Christian Gray in 2024 running down the USC sideline catching a pass from a USC quarterback, and Xavier Watts doing the same. And I would keep showing the angle of Xavier Watts looking at the USC sideline, and I would probably put total points scored somewhere in like a top corner or find a picture of a scoreboard. I was so excited thinking that Notre Dame had as many defensive touchdowns by their defensive backs as USC's receivers had in the last 2 years, but actually USC got has one more. They have one more touchdown
Oh,
scored
well,
by the receivers than Notre Dame's defensive back scored against USC. So that would be my response. And remember, even Caleb Williams was running the ball in; he wasn't throwing it everywhere. So I would go with that, and I would show a lot of the 2023, 2024 highlights of the secondary.
I think that's a great idea. I also think,
Got to
and I
sign a
know
DB real fast.
that that
Go
I
get a
don't think
defensive back.
uh,
Yeah.
maybe, yeah, it might have to be among the incoming freshmen that will arrive in the summer
Right, right.
this year. But um, Notre Dame doesn't feel, I've been told that Notre Dame doesn't feel the need to respond to
I
anything.
found it funny. It was funny that
No, it was
all
great.
Notre Dame
Yeah, great.
players out there.
Congratulations. You keep getting your ass beat by Notre Dame on the field, but you got a great video out there. You play the hell out of that and feel good about it because right now you don't really know how to beat Notre Dame. So that's funny and great
Don't you
and
think
all
four
that's
highlights
good.
though of Cam Hart, Xavier Watts, and
Yeah,
Christian
it'd be
Gray does it? That's
fantastic.
and I'm sure Leonard Moore had an Christian Gray had a like big tackle for loss against USC receiver too. I know
Well,
you just don't show the touchdowns.
that's
It's
for
fine.
a different department at Notre Dame to put
Yes.
together, not the
Hey,
not
all
the
I have is
football
ideas,
coaching
Tim
staff.
Priester. I'm not video editing. I just have ideas.
I got you, but
Yeah.
I was told that Notre Dame did not feel the need to respond to anything that Chad Bowden had to say. and that Notre Dame was doing the talking on the football field, and the numbers validate that. So, um, whatever,
I like my
whatever.
idea.
It's
I like
it's
my
going
idea.
to be
Somebody
it's
listen
going
to
to
me at ND.
it's going to be a clown show at USC because it was previously at Notre Dame. So enjoy it, go for it.
From Andrew Gilmore 32. I thought this was actually timely because, well, for a couple reasons. I'll just read the question. When Tyler Buckner last played for Notre Dame, he was the Gator Bowl MVP, had 5 touchdowns, 2 of them on the ground. We just had a running QB lead us to the title. Why can't Buckner be given a shot at a backup role? It says the backup role. I assume he means a backup role. Why not have red zone packages for him, something similar to what he had at Notre Dame?
Who's to say there won't be? I mean,
Right. That's what I mean.
I expect there's no reason not to have Tyler Buckner a quarterback.
Especially when they lose one from the spring.
Yeah, which they likely will. So hopefully
The
not
reason
two.
is not to is when they don't if they don't lose one, they have too many quarterbacks, but
Right,
they probably
right,
will.
right. But yeah, I think it's a good idea. Now I don't. Wow, is this accurate? Am I accurate in saying that Buckner is not as accurate throwing the football as Riley Leonard?
He's not. No, he was
He's
not.
not. He's
He was not.
not.
No.
So
But a package with Buckner, I have a couple of ways of looking at this, Tim. Is he a better runner if you include the threat of a pass, just the mini threat of a pass, than Kenny Minchey? Probably a better straight up runner. Like he's a tough guy to
well,
tackle, right?
he's so strong and he runs through so much. Like we don't. How do we evaluate Kenny Minchey as a
Yeah,
runner
he runs through.
based upon high school film? That's
Well,
all
I
we're
was thinking of
doing.
like when we see him, but he's still not allowed to get killed. He had a blue jersey on once, but I mean
If we
that's
could
not.
go to practice every day and we saw him run, then we could
Yeah.
judge it. I have a little difficult time trying to pretend like I know, uh, how good he is at that skill right now. But I think I agree. I think I said since I did the feature on Buckner based upon the interview that was conducted in New Orleans and didn't run for how many weeks after that. Um,
It was a good call. All right. People read
yeah, no,
it.
you were right. It was best to wait on that, and I did. There's no reason to why you shouldn't move him back to quarterback. He's not a distraction. That was kind of the notion early on that they didn't want the distraction. But I think everybody realized, including Marcus Freeman, that I mean, Tyler Buckner is the last guy on the face of the earth that would
Yeah.
be a distraction to a football team. It's just not his makeup. So I'm all for it. And yeah, create a pack. They're so creative in special teams with the packages that they have. There's no reason why you couldn't do that with Tyler Buckner. Whether
And the
that's
one
better
thing I
than
will go ahead, Tim.
well, whether it's better than Kenny Minchey or not, I don't know. Minchey may not be here. Angeli may not be here. Who knows?
One thing though, Buckner, of course, playing lacrosse, did get injured, and
Yes,
yes,
yes.
and also he's not in this, not going to be heavily involved in the spring, so his package is going to have to be introduced in the summer and in August if they were to go that
Yeah,
way. Not that he could pick it up pretty quickly, but I
I
mean,
don't know. I don't, do we know the specific nature of that injury? But he's not going to be playing for
he won't be
the
playing football
lacrosse team
anyway,
for a
so
while.
he's
Yeah,
definitely not going
that's
to be playing
true.
football in the spring.
Yeah, that's true.
But it happens when you have a national champion lacrosse team, you lose 3 good football
Yeah.
players.
All right, we're going to wrap up with a question from Very Piratey. Since society only cares when you're wrong,
Great question, by the way.
that sums up our profession and our
No,
career
it
in a
definitely
nutshell.
does. Yeah. Hey,
Since
Tim, we were right
society
about the Ohio State game. Yay.
and how much crap we caught for making the prediction
I don't care.
pregame.
Screw those
What
people.
would what would it hurt? What would it hurt if you predicted and you were wrong? Only our only our professional
Like
reputation.
pride. Yeah.
Uh,
Sorry.
anyway,
Segue, my bad.
since society only cares when you're wrong, list the 3 times you were most wrong coming out of spring practice.
I'll start because I can start right away. Deshaun Kaiser was terrible in spring practice. Now, we found out there were exigent circumstances like personal issues going on, but Deshaun Kaiser was awful. Coming out of the 2015, not prior, the 15 spring, it was Golson and Zaire and Kaiser and Jack Freeman. We were sitting up at LeBar practice fields outside for the spring game. And we said we always want to have the spring game inside these practice fields from now on. It was so much fun with remember the bigger stands they brought in?
Yeah, yeah.
Kaiser was terrible. And Zaire and Golson were good. And we're like, that guy stinks. And I was completely wrong about that. He turned it all around.
How about Tavon Coney?
Oh yeah, that's good.
Is that like,
Like
I mean,
molasses. Yeah.
that's the one that came to mind
Yeah.
the best. Like I would need an hour to recap all the times I've been wrong about a player over the course of my career, but Coney did not look like he was going to be a guy that was
No,
going to emerge to the extent that he did.
that's really good. And I mean to that Asmar Bilal as well. I think
Oh yeah, that's a great one.
we
That's a
might have
great one.
started we might have started August camp seeing Bilal there starting at will. We're like, that's just a placeholder for whoever they're going to put in there. So he ended up our top six Irish Illustrated players that year. Top six. Think
Yeah.
of the top. No, I know this team was better than that team, but think of the top six players this year, and that's where Asmar Bilal finished one year for Notre Dame. So he would be one. Um, I did say out loud apologies because there's a chance he will listen, and I love the guy. Drew White, when he came out one spring as a starting middle linebacker, I was like, all right, that's whatever. What are we doing here, guys? You know what? Drew White was a good starting middle linebacker.
Now, I totally agree with you until I had a conversation with Chip Long, and he was saying you've got to start Drew White.
Oh, he was telling the coaches that, the offensive
Yes,
coaches that. Yeah,
absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, I would feel the same way again because of the limitations we have on observing these
he looks
guys.
so
But
small, but he didn't play small at all.
no,
He
he
played. He
really
was a
did not, and
yeah,
he was nasty. He was
yeah. Oh
he
yeah, he had
was
a mechanism.
he
He had
was
the
nasty. Now I don't know that this. I, I don't know that this fits the criteria, but I always thought it doesn't fit because I don't know that we came out of a spring feeling this way.
mhm.
But I always thought that Brandon Wimbush, well, okay, he just needs to see more defensive coverages and he'll get better and he'll understand. And once that muscle memory or mind memory, I guess, comes into play, he will be able to recognize and decipher coverages. And he couldn't.
Yeah,
He just couldn't. He couldn't see it. So I always thought I mean, we know how dynamic of a runner he was. We thought he would be a great combination of run pass, and when they pulled the plug on him and put Book in, and Book excelled right away, it was over.
yeah. I don't think we um appreciated that there was a QB competition that spring. We interviewed both Book and Wimbush in the Blue Gold Game post game interview. It's the only Blue Gold Game post game interview I can recall having. But Book came out. I remember I think I thought, I mean, this is just, he's the second string quarterback and he's a pretty good one. Because remember, they did end the year 2017. Book saved the day.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like this was out of nowhere, but I don't think I really took that as the full
Started at
competition that it
North
was.
Carolina. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's I think my last one might have been I really thought that after BK's first spring, the offense would be in much better shape. Because remember, we watched like the whole thing. We had open practices, open interviews. I thought the offense was going to be in much better shape, and I thought they would run the ball at the beginning of the year like they did at the end of the year. And I was totally wrong about that.
Yeah.
I thought they
I
kind of did the square peg round hole thing. I didn't think they would do.
I mean, I'll go back. I'm back in the day. How in the world could you think that Ron Paulus would not develop to the level of the hype that came with him? You didn't like you watch high school film, you didn't see the lack of mobility. And again, I'm not sure this is a spring question
Your
per
first
se,
spring
but
of with the first spring his redshirt freshman year, he probably looked great. I mean, he was
yeah, I
the
mean,
clear starter for.
he threw the ball well, but he couldn't escape. And I was just starting to think more in terms of players that you thought for sure would hit. I mean, Mike McNair was maybe the greatest example of all, based upon his high school film and what you thought he was capable of doing.
Will Fuller had a poor spring before he broke out. He dropped everything.
Ooh,
There's
that's
one right there.
right.
Yeah, really, really poor.
Oh
And
my
then he
God.
scored 14 touchdowns,
That
the
we
50
might have to
mark.
put Will Fuller at the top of this list, Tim.
Next week we'll have more players for the top of this list, but this is the end of Irish Illustrated Insider. We'll be back Monday, and that is spring practice week. They start Wednesday, I believe, this coming week. And of course, it's a truncated spring or a closed up spring. We're also going to have a pro day there 2 weeks into spring on the 27th. Until Monday, for Tim Priester, I'm Tim O'Malley. Thanks for listening.